The courtroom falls silent as three teenagers, identical triplets, stand before the bench, trembling but unbroken. Their mother, Amara Lawson, lies unconscious in a hospital bed connected to tubes. Their father, Dr. Kelvin Lawson, once hailed as the city's most respected surgeon, sits across the room, flanked by lawyers refusing to meet their eyes. And at the center of it all sits Justice Chuka Daramola, the billionaire judge known for his cold precision and unpredictable rulings. When the eldest triplet speaks, her words slice through the tension. "Your Honor, we're here to tell you what our father did to our mother." The courtroom gasps. But before they finish, the judge leans forward, his face tightening in disbelief. Because he knows this case. He once loved the woman lying in that hospital bed. The night Amara first met Kelvin Lawson, the hospital generator had just gone out. The emergency ward was running on backup lamps, sweat clinging to everyone's foreheads, and nurses rushed between patients like ghosts in white. Amara was in her final year of nursing school, exhausted from a 14-hour shift when a car screeched into the ER bay. A man in his 30s staggered out carrying an unconscious child, screaming, "Please, someone help my son." Amara didn't hesitate. She took the child from his arms, shouting for saline and oxygen. The man stood frozen, breathing hard, watching this young woman command a team twice her age. Minutes later, the boy's breathing stabilized. When Amara finally turned, the man, Dr. Kelvin Lawson, the hospital's newest surgeon, was looking at her like he'd just witnessed a miracle. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved my nephew." Amara smiled weakly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I was just doing my job, doctor." From that moment, Kelvin made it his mission to know her. He brought her lunch the next day, walked her home after night shifts, and offered to tutor her in anatomy before her final exams. He admired her simplicity, how she took public buses while he drove a Lexus, how she sent part of her salary to her widowed mother every month. One rainy evening, after walking her home under an umbrella that barely covered them both, Kelvin said softly, "You have the kindest hands I've ever seen." She laughed. "Hands can't be kind, doctor." "They can," he replied, staring at her fingers. "Yours heal people even when your heart is breaking from exhaustion." That night, when he dropped her off, she found an envelope slipped into her bag, tuition money for her final semester. She confronted him the next day, angry. "I didn't ask you for charity." He smiled. "Then don't see it as charity. See it as an investment in my future wife." The words stopped her cold. Weeks later, they were inseparable. The hospital staff teased them as Mr. and Mrs. Surgery. Kelvin proposed on the ward rooftop, using a stethoscope as a ring because he said, "You already have my heart in your hands." They married in a small church. Amara didn't wear designer lace or diamonds, just a simple gown her mother sewed. But her smile could light the room brighter than any chandelier. Together they built the Lawson Medical Center from scratch. Amara handled administration and patient welfare. Kelvin performed surgeries that made headlines. Patients called them the healing couple. When Amara gave birth to triplets, 3 beautiful girls, it felt like heaven's confirmation of their love. Kelvin wept at the delivery room door, saying, "3 angels for the woman who saved me from loneliness." For years, their home overflowed with laughter, faith, and gratitude. No one, especially Amara, knew that beneath Kelvin's charm a quiet hunger for status was growing, one that love alone would never satisfy. The first time Amara noticed something different about Kelvin was the day he stopped saying, "we." For years, every plan began with, "We'll fix this, we'll expand, we'll grow." But one morning as they sat over breakfast, Kelvin said, "I'm being considered for chief surgeon." The word hung in the air like a blade. Amara smiled anyway. "That's wonderful news, Kelvin." But he didn't meet her eyes. He was already scrolling through his phone, checking messages that made him smirk. At first, she thought it was stress. Kelvin was working with a new hospital investor, Mrs. Gloria Benson, a wealthy widow who had injected millions into the hospital's expansion. She was bold, well-dressed, and had the type of confidence that filled every room before her perfume did. Whenever Gloria came around, Amara noticed her husband's posture change, shoulders straight, voice softer, laugh longer. Once, during a fundraising gala, Amara caught Gloria's hand resting a little too comfortably on Kelvin's arm. When Amara approached, Gloria smiled politely, saying, "Ah, the famous Mrs. Lawson, You must be so proud of your husband. I am, Amara replied, forcing a smile. We built this together. Gloria's eyes glinted. Yes, but now he's moving into our circles. You should be proud. Men like him deserve bigger things. That night, Kelvin came home smelling of whiskey and expensive perfume. He dropped his jacket on the couch, loosened his tie, and muttered, "Don't start, Amara, I'm tired." I didn't say anything, she replied quietly. That's the problem, he snapped. You never say anything. You just stare at me like a nurse waiting for a patient to collapse. She turned away, swallowing her tears. In the weeks that followed, Kelvin's behavior grew colder. He stopped coming home early, missed family dinners, and stopped praying with the triplets before bed, a ritual he'd never skipped before. When Amara asked about it, he waved her off. You wouldn't understand, Amara, you're not in my world anymore. His words pierced deeper than any insult. But Amara, ever loyal, decided to fight for her marriage the only way she knew how, with kindness. She cooked his favorite meals, left encouraging notes in his car, even booked a weekend trip for two. He never showed up. The next morning, she saw photos of the hospital's charity ball online. Kelvin was there, in a black tuxedo, smiling at Gloria Benson under golden lights. The comments were merciless. Power couple goals. The doctor and the investor, perfect match. That night, Amara waited for him until dawn. When he finally returned, she whispered, Kelvin, if I've done something wrong, please just tell me. He looked at her with irritation. You haven't done anything wrong. You've just stayed the same. She froze. The world is changing, Amara, he said, heading upstairs. Maybe it's time you did too. And as his footsteps disappeared, Amara realized that the man she once healed was slowly turning into the wound that might destroy her. The rain that night fell hard against the glass walls of Lawson Medical Center, thunder growling like a warning Amara didn't yet understand. Kelvin had told her he'd be working late. Emergency surgery, he'd said, his voice distant on the phone. But Amara's gut whispered otherwise. She'd grown used to the small inconsistencies, the perfume on his shirts, the late-night board meetings, the sudden urge to lock his phone even in his own house. Still, she believed in confronting pain with truth, so she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, picked up a food basket she had prepared, and drove through the rain to surprise him. The guard at the gate hesitated when he saw her. Madame Ogasehi Node. I work here too, she interrupted, forcing a smile. I'll be quick. Her heels echoed through the quiet corridors. The hospital was half asleep. Only a few rooms glowed faintly in the distance. Kelvin's office door was closed, light spilling from beneath it. She knocked gently. No answer. She turned the knob. Inside, chaos of silence. Kelvin's jacket on the couch, 2 glasses of wine on the table, and Gloria Benson perched on his desk, blouse unbuttoned halfway, her laughter soft and low. Amara's breath caught. Kelvin froze mid-motion, his hand still tangled in Gloria's hair. For a moment no one spoke. Only the rain outside dared to make a sound. Amara, Kelvin stammered. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, Gloria interrupted with a smirk, adjusting her blouse. She has eyes. Amara's world blurred. The room tilted. She set the food basket on the floor, hands trembling. All these years, Kelvin. After everything we built? Kelvin's shame lasted only seconds before anger replaced it. You had no right to barge in here. This is my office. Your office? Her voice cracked. Our hospital. The one we built with my savings, my labor, my faith. Correction, Gloria said, standing tall. My investment made this hospital what it is now. Amara turned to Kelvin, tears spilling freely. You let her talk to me like this? Enough, he barked. Amara, you're embarrassing yourself. Something inside her snapped. Embarrassing myself? She whispered. You've embarrassed our family, our daughters, our vows. Kelvin stepped closer, jaw tight. You're overreacting. You've become too emotional, always crying, always suspicious. Maybe you do need help? Amara stared at him, unblinking. Help? Days later, she understood what he meant. Court papers arrived. Divorce on grounds of mental instability. Attached were falsified psychiatric reports, signed by a doctor she didn't even know. Kelvin claimed she was unfit to raise the triplets. Her phone rang nonstop, friends calling, whispering. Her name spread across blogs. Sponsors pulled out from her hospital charity fund, and when she saw Kelvin and Gloria's engagement photo online, captioned New Beginnings, Amara didn't cry. She only whispered, staring at the screen. "You took my kindness for weakness, Kelvin, but you'll soon learn what love looks like when it breaks." Morning came with too much silence. The sun poured through the curtains as if it didn't know the world had ended for Amara Lawson. Her phone kept vibrating, calls from journalists, former colleagues, even church members asking if the rumors were true. She ignored them all. The only thing she couldn't ignore was the empty space beside her bed where Kelvin used to sleep. By noon, her legs felt heavy. She stood to make breakfast for the triplets and the kitchen began to spin. A scream from one of the girls was the last thing she heard before the world went black. When she woke again, the ceiling was white and cold. Her left arm refused to move. Tubes coiled around her wrist like restraints. A nurse whispered, "Ma, you had a mild stroke. You need rest." Amara turned her head weakly. Through the glass, she saw her 3 daughters, Ada, Amaka, and Amabel, huddled together, faces red from crying. Ada, the eldest by minutes, noticed her mother's eyes open and mouthed, "We're here." Tears slipped down Amara's cheeks. She couldn't speak, so she blinked twice. Their childhood signal for "I love you" days blurred into weeks. The girls took turns staying by her bedside, feeding her, reading devotionals, brushing her hair. Kelvin never came. But flowers arrived once, a bouquet of lilies with a card that read, "Get well soon." No name, no visit. Then the hospital television betrayed him. News anchors discussed Dr. Kelvin Lawson and his new bride, philanthropist Gloria Benson, smiling as if betrayal were romance. Ada switched the channel, jaw clenched. He doesn't deserve the airtime. At night, when their mother slept, the triplets whispered in the corridor. "We can't just sit here," Amabel said. "He's trying to take custody." "How?" Amaka asked. Ada opened her laptop. She had hacked Kelvin's cloud account weeks earlier, using an old password he once told their mother. What they found inside made their blood run cold. Bank transfers from Gloria's account, fake medical records, emails to a corrupt lawyer arranging false testimony. "We keep everything," Ada said. "Every file, every receipt." From then on, the hospital room turned into a quiet war room. Between school and caring for their mother, the triplets gathered evidence. They recorded phone calls from Kelvin's assistants, printed financial documents, even visited the old family driver who confessed he'd delivered fake court envelopes on Kelvin's orders. One evening, as thunder rolled outside, Amara stirred awake to see Ada sitting by her bed. Laptop glowing. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice faint. Ada looked up, eyes burning with determination. "Saving you, Mama." Amara tried to smile. "Don't fight your father." Ada shook her head. "Then who will fight for you?" For the first time in months, Amara's heartbeat steadied, not from medication, but from hope. Outside, rain battered the windows, echoing the promise forming in the girls' hearts. They wouldn't let their mother be destroyed quietly, and when the courtroom doors finally opened, the world would hear their voices. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, folded neatly in a brown envelope stamped Family Court of Lagos State. Ada tore it open, her hands trembling. The words on the paper felt like acid. Custody petition filed by Dr. Kelvin Lawson. Grounds: mother medically unfit. Amara was still in recovery. She couldn't walk without support, couldn't stand long enough to hold her children. Yet the system had found a way to summon her to defend her motherhood. When Ada read the letter aloud, Amara's blood pressure monitor began to beat faster. "No," she whispered weakly, tears in her eyes. "Not now. Not when I can barely move." Ada took her hand. "Then we'll go for you." 3 days later, the triplets arrived at the courthouse. School uniforms pressed, hair tied back, faces pale with determination. They carried a single flash drive and a worn leather folder stuffed with documents. The press swarmed the entrance, shouting, "Are you here to speak against your father?" Ada kept her head down. "We're here to tell the truth." Inside, Kelvin stood by the defense table in a navy blue suit, his new wife Gloria sitting proudly beside him, sunglasses hiding her arrogance. His lawyer smirked as the triplets entered, 3 identical reflections of the woman he'd tried to erase. The judge's seat was empty. Then the bailiff called, "All rise for Justice Chuka Daramola." The room went silent as the man entered, a tall, composed figure in black robes, his silver wristwatch glinting beneath the lights. Whispers spread. Everyone knew his name. The billionaire judge. The man who'd built hospitals for the poor, schools in the north, and still drove himself to work in an old Toyota. He sat, scanning the room with calm authority. Case number 2081, Lawson versus Lawson. When he looked up at the children standing alone at the plaintiff's bench, something flickered in his expression. A strange, almost personal pause. "Where is your mother?" he asked gently. "In the hospital, my lord," Ada replied, voice steady. "She can't walk yet." "And your legal representative?" Ada raised her chin. "We represent her ourselves." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Kelvin's lawyer chuckled. "Your lordship, this is absurd. These are minors." Justice Daramola's voice cut through like thunder. "You'll address them with respect in my court." He turned to the girls. "What do you wish to say?" Ada opened the leather folder. "We wish to show evidence that our father lied, to the court, to the hospital board, and to the world." Gasps echoed. Gloria shifted uncomfortably. Kelvin tried to interrupt. "My lord, this is emotional blackmail." "Silence," the judge commanded. As Ada plugged the flash drive into the courtroom projector, the first video appeared, Kelvin's voice recorded months earlier. Mocking Amara's illness, the judge leaned forward, brows tightening. The triplets' courage filled the air like fire. None of them knew yet that the man watching from the bench had once owed their mother his very life. And this trial was about to become deeply personal. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the projector flickered to life. A video began to play, grainy, shaky footage captured on a phone. Kelvin's voice filled the room, cruelly clear. "Look at her. She can't even lift a spoon without shaking. And she thinks she can raise 3 teenagers? The court will thank me when I take them away." Gasps spread like ripples through the gallery. Journalists leaned forward. Amara's name began trending on social media within minutes. Kelvin's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This video is inadmissible." Justice Daramola raised a hand. "Overruled. Continue." Ada nodded to her sisters. Amaka stepped forward, clutching a folder. "My lord, this is the hospital record from the night our mother was diagnosed. The report our father presented in court was altered." She walked to the clerk's table and handed over 2 identical documents. One marked original, one submitted copy. The judge compared them quietly, his brows narrowing. "This signature is forged." Amaka's voice shook, but her words were sharp. "The man who signed it never examined our mother. He was paid." Kelvin's face drained of color. "That's absurd. Do you deny authorizing this payment?" Amaka snapped, pulling out a printed bank statement. $500,000 to Dr. Bello Akinyemi, transferred from your account 3 days before the report was filed. Gloria's hand shot to her mouth. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Justice Daramola slammed his gavel. "Order!" When the noise faded, the youngest triplet, Amabel, stepped forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "My lord, I have something else." She connected a second flash drive. This time the speakers played a recording of Gloria's voice, dripping with arrogance. "Relax, Kelvin. Once the divorce is final, the hospital will be ours. Her stroke was the best thing that could have happened." People forget women fast. The room froze. Even the guards by the door exchanged looks of disgust. Kelvin lunged forward, shouting, "That's edited. You're all conspiring against me." But no one moved to stop the children. Ada turned toward him, her voice calm but trembling. "You once told us the truth always cuts deeper than a scalpel. Today we're just returning the lesson." The silence that followed was unbearable. Justice Daramola leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the trembling man before him. "Dr. Lawson, do you have any defense against these claims?" Kelvin swallowed, his lawyer whispering frantically beside him. For the first time, his confidence cracked. "No, my lord," he murmured, "just misunderstandings." The judge's gaze softened briefly toward the triplets. "You've done more for justice today than many adults I've seen in this courtroom." He looked down at the name on the case file, Amara Lawson. Something in him stirred, a memory, a kindness he had never repaid. He didn't say a word, but the weight in his chest told him this trial was no longer just another case. It was personal, and by the time he gave his verdict, no one in that courtroom would ever forget the name Amara Lawson again. The courtroom had gone still, like the air before a storm. Justice Chuka Daramola sat unmoving, fingers pressed to his chin, Eyes locked on the name written across the evidence files, Amara N. Lawson. It couldn't be coincidence. He flipped through the hospital report again, tracing the signature of the nurse who'd filled out his emergency chart 15 years ago. A.N. Nwafor. The handwriting was identical. His chest tightened. A faint memory returned. A younger version of himself on a gurney drenched in sweat, clutching his stomach as searing pain ripped through him. A nurse had stayed by his side that night when his appendix burst, whispering prayers and encouragement even after her shift ended. He had promised to repay her someday. She'd smiled and said, "Kindness doesn't need a price tag, sir." That nurse was Amara. Now she lay in a hospital bed, half paralyzed, betrayed by the man she once saved. Justice Daramola inhaled deeply, his pulse steadying. When he looked up, his expression had changed, softer, yet terrifyingly resolute. "Dr. Lawson," he said quietly, "I knew your wife before she became your wife." Kelvin blinked, confused. "My lord?" 15 years ago, Daramola continued, "I nearly died of a ruptured appendix. Your wife, the nurse Amara Nwafor, saved my life. She refused payment. She told me she wanted to serve, not to be noticed." The courtroom murmured. Cameras flashed. Kelvin's shoulders stiffened. "I have followed her work since then," the judge went on. "Her charity clinics, her outreach for widows, her dedication to this city's poor. And today I find her name here, dragged into court by the very man whose name she carried with pride." Kelvin's face flushed. "My lord, with all due respect." The judge's voice thundered now. "You forged documents. You defamed her reputation. You weaponized her illness against her. Is that what a husband calls respect?" The gallery erupted in gasps. Gloria lowered her gaze, her confidence collapsing. Daramola's tone softened as he turned to the triplets. "Children, your mother once told me that hope is medicine. Today you have reminded me she was right." Ada blinked back tears. "We just wanted them to know who she really is, my lord." The judge nodded slowly. "The world will." He ordered a recess. As he rose from the bench, Kelvin tried to speak again. "This isn't fair." Justice Daramola stopped him mid-sentence. "You're right, Dr. Lawson. Fairness is for equals. What you did was not." The gavel struck once. As the courtroom emptied, reporters whispered of destiny, of divine justice, and behind the bench Justice Daramola lingered alone, looking at Amara's name one last time. 15 years ago, she had saved his life. Today he was about to return the favor, with the full power of the law. When the court reconvened after recess, the gallery was packed to the doors. Cameras waited outside, journalists whispered predictions, and Kelvin Lawson sat motionless, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Gloria's perfume could no longer mask the stench of fear. Justice Daramola entered, expression unreadable. He adjusted his glasses, opened a thick folder, and began in a voice as calm as a scalpel. "This court has examined every piece of evidence presented by the plaintiffs. Miss Ada Lawson, Miss Amaka Lawson, and Miss Amabel Lawson, acting on behalf of their mother, Mrs. Amara Lawson. The findings are extraordinary." He paused. Every breath in the room seemed to wait for his next word. "First," he continued, "this court confirms that the medical report used to declare Mrs. Lawson mentally unfit was forged. The responsible physician has confessed under oath. Second, financial records prove that Dr. Lawson conspired with Mrs. Gloria Benson to misappropriate clinic funds and defame his wife. Third, multiple recordings establish intent to destroy her reputation for personal gain." He looked directly at Kelvin. "You betrayed your vows, your oath as a doctor, and the trust of this court." Kelvin stood abruptly. "Your lordship, please, my career." Daramola's gavel cracked against the bench. "Sit down." The judge's voice rose, each word deliberate. "Justice is not a trade to be negotiated. Therefore, this court rules as follows. Full parental custody and guardianship of Ada, Amaka, and Amabel Lawson are hereby granted to their mother, Mrs. Amara Lawson. Dr. Kelvin Lawson's medical license is suspended indefinitely pending review by the Medical and Dental Council. A fine of N$300 million is imposed for defamation, emotional abuse, and falsification of documents. All joint properties are frozen and to be liquidated into a trust fund under Mrs. Lawson's name for her medical recovery and her children's education. Mrs. Gloria Benson is hereby charged as an accessory to fraud and obstruction of justice. Gasps thundered through the courtroom. Gloria rose, trembling. "You can't—" "Take her into custody," Daramola ordered. Police officers moved in. Flashbulbs exploded as Gloria's diamond bracelets clattered against handcuffs. Kelvin slumped into his seat, staring at the floor where his empire used to stand. The judge looked to the triplets. "Children, your mother taught me that kindness is strength. Let this judgment remind the world that truth, though slow, never loses direction." Ada's eyes filled. "Thank you, my lord." Daramola nodded once. "Tell your mother she's no longer a patient of fate, she's the author of it." He struck the gavel one final time. Case closed. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Even the journalists lowered their cameras for a moment of respect. Outside, the rain had stopped. Reporters rushed toward the triplets as they stepped into the sunlight. Ada turned briefly, glancing up at the courthouse windows where Justice Daramola watched from behind the glass. He gave a small nod. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel like a dream. It felt like justice. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft rhythm of the heart monitor and the slow drizzle tapping against the window. Amara sat in her wheelchair near the bed, a shawl around her shoulders, staring absently at the evening sky. Her triplets had gone home to rest for the first time in days. They'd insisted on staying, but she'd smiled weakly and said, "Mothers heal better when their children sleep." She didn't know the entire city had watched her story unfold live on television. That her name, once dragged through mud, was now being spoken with reverence. A gentle knock came at the door. "Come in," she said softly. Justice Daramola stepped in. No robe, no entourage, just a simple man in a gray suit holding a bouquet of white lilies. Amara blinked, confused. "My lord, you shouldn't be here." "I'm not here as a judge," he said quietly. "I'm here as a man who owes you his life." She tilted her head. "I don't understand," he smiled faintly, pulling a chair close. 15 years ago, I was a man too proud to slow down. My appendix ruptured during a conference. You were the nurse who refused to leave my side. You saved me." Her eyes widened. She searched his face, then gasped softly. "That was you?" He nodded. "You told me kindness doesn't need a price tag." A silence hung between them, gentle, heavy, and healing. Amara's voice trembled. "I didn't even remember your name. I was just doing my duty, and I failed mine," he replied. "I built courts for justice, but forgot that some injustices never make it to trial." Until today, tears welled in her eyes. "You gave me back my name, my children's future." "No, Mrs. Lawson," he said softly. "You earned that back yourself. I only signed the paper." He placed an envelope on her lap. "This is the court's compensation and $300 million. But there's more. I've established a foundation in your name, the Amara Lawson Medical Trust. It will fund women's health clinics across Lagos, starting with your old community." Amara covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say thank you to your daughters," Daramola murmured. "Their courage reminded me why I became what I am." She smiled faintly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They got that courage from their father." The judge frowned gently. She added, "From the man he used to be, before pride took him." Daramola nodded slowly. "Then maybe some part of him will see this and remember." He stood, adjusted his jacket, and bowed slightly. "Rest now. Justice has already walked your road." As he turned to leave, Amara called softly, "My lord." He paused. "Thank you for repaying kindness with mercy," he smiled. "Kindness never dies, Mrs. Lawson. It only waits for its day in court." When he left, Amara looked out the window again. The rain had stopped, and somewhere in the distance, she imagined the sound of her daughters laughing. For the first time in a long time, peace didn't feel borrowed, it was hers. 6 months later, the hospital courtyard looked nothing like the place where Amara had once been wheeled in half-conscious. Now sunlight danced on the walls, children laughed in the pediatric wing, and a new plaque shimmered by the main gate. The Amara Lawson Women's Health Foundation, built on kindness, strength, and truth. Amara watched from a wheelchair as nurses she once trained unveiled the sign. Her triplets stood beside her, taller now, confident, their school uniforms replaced by neatly pressed suits for the occasion. Ada took the microphone. "This foundation isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that kindness isn't weakness. It's power that outlives betrayal." Applause swelled. Cameras flashed. Amara blinked back tears as Justice Daramola, standing quietly in the crowd, gave her a small nod of approval. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded her. "Mrs. Lawson, what message do you have for women who've been betrayed?" She smiled gently. "Don't let pain rewrite who you are. Heal first, then build something no one can destroy." Meanwhile, across town, Kelvin Lawson sat alone in his nearly empty house. The once pristine mansion now echoed with the sound of his own footsteps. Gloria Benson had fled the country after her conviction. The medical board had revoked his license permanently. He scrolled through his phone. Every news outlet showed Amara's foundation launch. The caption beneath her photo read, "The woman the system tried to silence now heals thousands." His hand trembled. For the first time, he realized the depth of what he'd lost. Not money, not titles, but the quiet loyalty that no amount of status could replace. He dialed Amara's number. It rang once, then stopped. She had blocked him months ago. At the foundation opening, Amara was wheeled into her new office, a bright glass-walled room filled with flowers and framed photos of her daughters. On the desk sat a sealed letter. She opened it carefully. "To the woman who taught me mercy, your kindness healed me once. Now it heals a city. Chuka Daramola." Amara smiled through her tears. That evening, as the sun set over Lagos, her daughters wheeled her outside to the garden. Families of patients she had helped lined up to greet her. Some knelt, some hugged her, others simply whispered, "Thank you." The triplets exchanged a look, pride and relief etched across their faces. Amabel leaned close. "Mama, we did it," Amara squeezed her hand. "No, my loves. You did." In the distance, church bells rang, mingling with the city noise. Amara looked up at the sky, her heart steady for the first time in years. Kelvin's name no longer carried power. Hers did. As the courtyard lights flickered on, the triplets guided her toward the stage where the foundation's motto was engraved, "Kindness never dies." The crowd stood in silence, the air thick with reverence. Amara closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude, not for revenge achieved, but for peace reclaimed, for everything she had lost. She had found something greater, and this time it was hers to keep.